Hello, fight fans. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of MMA Mike. This episode, I'm going to bring you a preview on the Erick Silva versus Yancy Medeiros fight. It's the first fight of the main card for UFC 12, Saturday, June 3rd, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. These guys have had some interesting starts. Would the real Erick Silva please stand up? Erick Silva's always had a ton of hype behind him. Even though he had a rocky start in the UFC, win, lose, he kind of alternated between wins and losses for almost the first 3 years in the UFC, but was always seen as a contender, and a lot of people were always seeing him as a future champion. All of a sudden, it looked like everything for him was running on all cylinders between February of 2014 and March of 2015. He won 3 of 4 fights, including Performance of the Night bonuses against Takanori Sato and Mike Rose. Blew out both guys in the first round by knockout. Then he submitted Josh Koscheck, a true contender, in the first round. His only loss over this 4-fight span was a fight of the night effort against Mike the Immortal Brown. Really looked like he'd hit his stride. Then came a unanimous decision loss to Neil Magny, where he wasn't even competitive. This is followed by an embarrassing knockout loss in the second round to Nordine Talib. He came back in September of last year to win a fight he was expected to win against Luan Chagas by submission in the third round. Over the journey, Erick's shown to have a well-rounded game and also a questionable chin. Enter Yancy Medeiros, who first saw the big times in February 2010 in Strikeforce. He'd win both fights, won by knockout before Strikeforce would fold and be swallowed up by the UFC. A lot of fighters came to the UFC when Strikeforce folded, not everyone. Yancy wouldn't get his chance to see the bright lights again for almost 3 years, and it was a rude awakening. His first fight in the UFC barely got started before he developed a gaping cut from an elbow strike, which would lead to a doctor stoppage loss. Then hard work paid off when he was able to knock out veteran knockout artist Yves Edwards. He weathered an early storm from Yves, took some of his best shots, and had a convincing first-round knockout. Then the drug test came back, and he tested positive for marijuana metabolites, and the decision was overturned to a no contest. Why are we still testing for marijuana? It's not a performance-enhancing drug. Anyways, after this, almost as punishment, the UFC would throw him to the wolves against top contender Jim Miller in only his third fight in the UFC. He made it to the third round before Miller submitted him. His back up against the wall, Medeiros would go on to Performance of the Night submission wins in his next 2 fights, one in the first round and one in the second. He's also coming off another Performance of the Night submission in September over Sean Spencer. So who has the advantage in this fight? Who would I pick? Silva is a crafty veteran with a plethora of offensive moves. He also has a suspect chin. Medeiros has had a rocky road himself. Both these guys seem to have the skills to be true contenders. The difference for me comes when it comes time to take a hit. Medeiros has shown he can take one. He took Yves Edwards' best shots and wasn't rocked. Erick's been knocked down. Erick's been knocked out a couple times. He also relies heavily on his wrestling. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Medeiros. Medeiros has incredible takedown defense, and his submissions are slick. Maybe better than Silva's. I think Medeiros wins this in the third round. I think Silva gasses. I think that chin of his gives out again. My take would be probably rock Silva and is able to stop him with a submission in the third round or a referee stoppage and knockout. My pick is Medeiros for this fight. Thanks for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you guys at the fights.